Can everybody read that all right? It's actually my second monitor, and there's some other images here I'm going to be sharing later. So if I make this full screen, and then I can do plus and make it bigger.
That's better.
I'm seeing about a 2 or 3 second delay and when I click on my second screen. So. All right, well, welcome everybody to this Zoom meeting for the CARD quarterly meeting. We go right into introductions, and I guess what I'll do is go on the order I see on my screen, so I'm Roger Rayle. I'm chair of CARD and chair of Sci Residents for Safe Water, co-founder of both. And CARD has been around since 2006, working on the polygalman 1,4-dioxane contamination. Jenny, you want to go next?
I'm Jenny Kahn with the Washtenaw County Health Department. I'm the public health engineer and also the executive director for CARD.
Okay, then we go to Mike Moran and then Beth after that.
Mike, muted here. Okay, Mike Moran. Until 2 days ago, I was supervisor of Ann Arbor Township. I'm now trustee of Ann Arbor Township, vice chair of CARD.
I'm Beth Collins, secretary of CARD, Ann Arbor resident, and live right across from the old Gelman Hall site, that neighborhood across from there on Wagner.
Let's go to Dan Hamel and then Vince.
I'm Dan Hamel. I'm the EGLE project manager for the Gelman site out of the Jackson District Office.
Vince and then Joshua. Vince, can you hear us? No, you're not coming through.
I bet he's muted.
Not on my side, he's not.
Oh. Huh.
You see him as being muted?
I don't know. I don't have the gallery up. So
We'll let Vince go to the audio test thing and we'll come back.
Vince does not appear to be muted.
Yeah, it must be, maybe the mic quit working.
I'll go upstairs and see if I can fix it.
Okay, and then we'll come back to Vince. Joshua and then Shanna.
Good morning, everybody. Joshua Mosier with EGLE. I'm the Assistant Director for Remediation and Redevelopment Division.
Shanna, and then Jim.
I'm Shauna Milkey. I'm an Ann Arbor resident.
Okay, Jim, and then Jared.
I'm Jim Schultz. I'm a concerned citizen and a CARD member.
Jared, and then Kathy.
I'm Jared Walbert with Tetra Tech in Ann Arbor.
Kathy, and then we'll come back to Rita later.
Kathy Knoll, Scioto Township trustee.
Okay, when Rita gets back, we'll have her do it. And then Katie, you want to go, Katie? Unmute by pressing spacebar. Katie, I figured you'd be good at this. You probably do this several times a day.
I do. Hold on. Okay. I'm back. I had some technical difficulties with I'm here. Hi, I'm Katie. I'm from Congresswoman Dingell's office. And I did have some technical difficulties, but I'm here. And I'm sorry. It's been a long day.
And by doing that, you just changed positions. Now you're back to where you were. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
There was a guy that was at work and he noticed that Zoom looked like Hollywood Squares. So he figured out a way to lock 9 people in and play Hollywood Squares with his friends.
Oh, that's fun. I haven't gotten Hollywood Squares. I've only gotten Brady Bunch so far. So
Oh, okay.
that would be fun.
But it looks like, unless there's another Katie, it looks like there's, anyway, Charlie, why don't you go next? You have to unmute, Charlie. I'll unmute you. There you
Sorry
go.
about that. I'm having a little camera issues here. Charlie Nielsen, concerned Scioto resident.
And then the CARD-EGLE is actually my second computer here, so I'm going to turn off my video on that in case you're wondering who the CARD-EGLE was. Stands for CARD Washtenaw County. So after Charlie is Bob, and then Brian.
Hi, I'm Bob Hyde, a concerned Scioto citizen.
And no camera. And Brian, and then Mary.
Brian Nagel, the Assistant Attorney General assigned to this case. I turned my camera on just so you can say that I do have a camera. You can see my ceiling tile.
Yeah, and you obviously have somebody to cut your hair too. That's amazing.
Actually, it's a lot of gel and combed back behind my ears.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going off.
I don't know. I kind of like to see you because you change places every time you go on and off. Let's see. I think we're back down to Mary Miller from Eagle.
Yep. Hi. Yes, I'm from the Remediation Redevelopment Division. I'm the Field Operations Manager for the Eastern District.
Okay. You don't have a camera, or you don't want to turn it on?
I'm having internet difficulties. Whenever I turn my camera on, it seems like I drop off. So.
Oh. Okay.
Sorry about
Well.
that. I don't have enough bandwidth, I guess.
Okay. So that you don't have the excuses that you're not dressed or anything, like, you know.
Well, I'm dressed.
I put on a collared shirt today for the first time.
I'm dressed. I don't know how well I'm dressed. I got a raggedy old sweatshirt on.
Okay, you don't have to have a camera. And we still haven't heard from Kevin, but I see that you're there, but we can't hear you. Maybe unmute. Are you on that phone call? Let me unmute that.
Yeah, Roger. I'm on the phone, and if there was any video, I got that up, but I got limited bandwidth.
Okay, so you're on. You
Kevin
can
Lund.
see us, and you can talk to us on the phone. So you're the 517.
Yes. Yes.
And is the audio synced up pretty well still, even though you're on two different channels?
Yes. The phone is Verizon, and the computer is just challenging with a real bad internet connector.
All right. Lamar, and then Kristen.
Good morning. Lamar Weir from Congresswoman Dingell's office.
Guys, Lamar is new to our office. He represents Ypsi and the surrounding communities. So if you go to any other Ypsilanti events, you'll see him there.
Welcome, Lamar.
Thank you.
And then Kristen, and then Colleen. Are you there, Kristen? You might want to unmute. I can unmute you. Sometimes people are on two Zoom calls at the same time. You know, the reason, one of the good things about having the video is that you can wave your hands to say, you know, that you're having problems or something. Kristen, can you hear us? No, we're going to skip her. Colleen.
Hi, everyone. Try to get my video. My name's Colleen Lynn. I'm a PhD student at Wayne State University.
Yeah, I think you should keep your video on.
Okay.
Okay, let's go back to catch up with people we skipped over. Vince, your audio working? I wonder if it's because, I wonder if it's because you're both on what happened to Rita? Oh, there's Rita. Rita, why don't you try unmuting?
Sure. No, I don't think that's it. I think maybe it's this connection. You know, Vince, you might try just logging out of the Zoom meeting and coming back in. Sometimes
Or Vince,
that
you
does
could
it.
go sit next to Rita.
Maybe. I'm in the basement.
Oh, he's not allowed. He's not allowed in your workspace.
Oh, of course he is. Of course he is. He has to bring down some earbuds though because I'm on a.
Oh, you don't have a speaker?
Headphone. Well, the speaker doesn't work for crap, you know, compared to an earbud or headphones.
You gotta plug
Anyway,
it into your
I'm
stereo.
Rita Locke Caruso. I'm a faculty member at the University of Michigan until the end of this year. And I am a toxicologist, PhD toxicologist, and I'm a founding member of CARD and the Allens Creek Watershed Group, and very concerned about what's going on with this contamination.
Until the end of this year.
You betcha.
This is something I don't think I knew.
Yeah.
So then you can
I
work
just
on
love that
CARD
term,
full
you
time.
betcha. You know, I can do more.
I'm
That's
thinking I'm
for
looking
sure,
at the
but
next.
no, I'm not going to do it full time.
I'm looking
I'm
at
not
the
going to do
next
anything.
CARD chair. Have to be co-chairs, Vince and Rita. All right. Is
that could be bad. You know, you have to be more strategic than that.
All right. Let me.
Did we get everybody, Roger?
I think so. I'm still sharing the agenda. I just realized. So let's go to Beth. I think is everybody in? If I miss somebody, just jump in and say so.
Well, check your waiting room. I know, like I said, Councilmember Bannister was gonna get in.
Usually pops up if there's somebody. I have it open here.
The next item is for the board to vote on the minutes from the May 5th meeting. I'll do a motion to approve the minutes from May 5th.
Second.
Roger, all in favor?
All. Yes.
Okay, great. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Oh, and while I have the speaker for a minute, I do have, I don't have some emails for everybody. Usually if you attend a card reading, I like to get your email from Mary Miller and Joshua Mosier. If you'd like to be on our list, if you weren't already emailed this and want to be on the card core list, please email me at rdhbeth@gmail, and I'll get you on the card core list also.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Beth, put your email in the chat, and people could also just put their name and contact information in there too, because we're going to save the chat when we're done. All right. Try to hide the participants here. Oh, there we go. So the next thing is old business, and these are some EGLE items. So we're going to turn it over to Dan Hamel. Dan, do you want me to bring up any images? Let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to leave the.
Do that, Roger. I don't anticipate any images. I'm kind of have a little discussion for each of the bullet items under the EGLE items, old business.
Yeah,
the trend analysis review, the A is still ongoing. Like I've repeated and stated, we're going to be using the trend analysis once the complete that and utilize that once the modified CJ is signed, and we are putting together the monitoring plans for the western and eastern areas and Little Lake area. There are currently 3 monitoring plans, like I said, eastern area, western area, and Little Lake area. They will be updated for the new consent judgment. They will include the existing monitoring wells, existing compliance wells, and then also will include any of the wells that are installed, anything installed as we implement the new modified CJ. So that, like I said, is ongoing. We've had internal discussions and review. We do have your initial comments from Roger from CARD. We also have Dr. Lemke's initial comments, review of the information that was presented by Gelman. They did a preliminary trend analysis report that I posted on the webpage, our webpage. And so we will get a final version of that once everything is in place and we start to work on the monitoring plans. The compliance wells, for those of you that are new, there are, in the western area, there are monitoring wells that are identified in the consent judgment as compliance monitoring wells that are required to be sampled on every so often. They are identified as compliance wells with the idea that they will be utilized to determine if the Gelman is in compliance with the consent judgment. Basically, they are monitored for concentration, and in the current consent judgment, if the concentrations exceed 85 parts per billion, then that is a violation. Then Gelman is out of compliance with the non-expansion objective of the current consent judgment for the western area. So this monitoring well 63 S, I, and D are two of those are compliance wells. They were properly abandoned in September 2019 with approval of EGLE. And we usually what occurs is if a well is abandoned, then especially a compliance well, then it is replaced. We are going to replace or include those in replacement in for future work, but once the CJ is modified. I don't want to, as I've stated, I don't want to just replace wells in the similar locations just to replace them. We're gonna make sure that these replacements and in the future compliance wells are at good logical locations to monitor the new criteria, the 7.2 criteria that will be implemented with the modified CJ. So once that is in place and investigation and additional monitoring wells as required are put into place, and we will replace the current compliance well 63 S, I, and D. So that's the update there. They won't be going in until after the modified CJ is put into place. C, any update on EGLE DHH adjusting the VI numbers? Like I stated last time, EGLE has started working with DHHS to review the screening levels, screening level criteria that may be used to evaluate stakeholders' vapor intrusion concerns related to wet basements. I wanted to point out that EGLE has the authority to address groundwater contamination that contributes to risk from infiltration into basements. That's in Part 201. DHH, though, has the authority to address indoor air risks associated with infiltrated groundwater. EGLE RRD does not have the authority for indoor air, basically. So we have to work together. And we have started working together to evaluate those concerns about wet basements. EGLE and DHHS toxicologists are reviewing Bob Bailey's VI screening level calculations. We already had a conference call in April, on April 23rd, to start that process. I'm anticipating another conference call here in June. We are putting this together in response and to be prepared for discussion or questions that may come up with the proposed or authorized basement sampling from the City of Ann Arbor. They have identified and set aside some money, and we'll be completing some basement sampling in selected areas of Ann Arbor. So we wanted to make sure we had our evaluation done to be able to assist and answer questions related to that sampling, the results of that sampling. So that's where we are right now. We have started that process together, and we'll continue that here with another meeting planned, I'm sure, in June sometime. The next item is list of monitoring wells that has not been tested. There have been some questions that stakeholders, CARD stakeholders, have brought up about some wells that have not been tested in a while. I am, and including Jenny from Washtenaw County, she had some questions too. So I started making a master list of monitoring wells that are currently required to be sampled under the monitoring plans that are active and in place, the eastern area, western area, and Little Lake area. And also at the same time, that list will include the monitoring wells that are not required to be sampled. In all of those monitoring plans, EGLE has, they were approved, they are EGLE approved, and they are, I think in 2011, 2012 time frame is when they were approved. They also have wells that are listed that are not required to be sampled. So I hope to have, I'm working to have that preliminary list to be able to share with CARD at the July CARD meeting of what I've come up with of wells that, the main question is wells that have not been sampled in a while. So that's where we are, the status of that. Under B, status of the Allen Creek Drain MS4 violation. We are still working with EGLE. Water Resources, RRD, are still working with Washtenaw County and evaluating response requirements under that under the MS4 violation. Some of the questions and answers are related, are being discussed also in the confidential negotiations. So we are continuing that review of a potential of the MS4 violation in the Allen Creek Drain. So a final request, a remedy, or requirement of Washtenaw County has not been identified yet, but we are continuing that process.
Dan, if I can add, Evan Pratt was going to give an update today, but he had another meeting that conflicted with the CARD meeting. So I'll make sure he's invited to July, and hopefully we can get him to give an update for the July meeting.
That'd be great. We are working together. I mean, Washtenaw County, for those of you who don't know, Washtenaw County is really is the entity, the local unit of government that implements, that is required to eliminate the MS4 violations in storm sewer, storm drainage in their jurisdiction. So we are working with Washtenaw County to assist with that. Anything in RRDs, specifically anything with related to Gelman. Water Resources Division is, does the MS4 violation is permitted or allowed under EPA. EPA is the overall program, manages the MS4 violation program. EGLE Water Resources Division has authority to implement the program in Michigan. So we have to work together and are working together along those lines. Let's see. That's I'm going to skip to D since and let any new information on the deep wells. Like I said, there was the questions in March related to wells that had not been sampled. I will have a list, or I'm working, to have a list in July a preliminary list that I can put forth and see if the specific wells that people have questions about are identified on that as, you know, required to be sampled under the current monitoring plans, or have been allowed, you know, have been approved to not be sampled under the current monitoring plans. So I think once we get that list, then we can start narrowing, you know, to specific questions on specific monitoring wells. That's all I had for under old business right now.
Well,
I think
let's go ahead
status of
and have some discussion of the old business before we go to the new.
yeah, I'm just, well, there was one letter C, status of the City of Ann Arbor testing of wet basements. That's not, yeah, I don't have information on that.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to jump into a discussion of that right now. Who wants to talk about the wet basement testing?
Roger, can I just ask something procedural real quick? If someone wants to speak, can they raise their hand, their virtual hand on the participant area? That's what I told Kathy Knoll to do, so her hand is raised. So I don't.
It's raised. I don't.
If you go to participants, but then someone has to, you would have to monitor, and they stay in order. So whoever's at the top of the list would be.
I see the hand raised now. Yeah, that was my fault.
Will that work?
No, I can see it on the screen. I don't have to go to participants.
Okay. Do you think that'll work for everybody?
Yeah, it'll work if somebody, if I don't see it right away, just call my attention to it. So Kathy, did you want to say something? You have to unmute. Kathy, I don't see her there either.
Well, I had unmuted it before. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you. I mean, I see your table.
So I can't, I mean, what happened to the picture? I was there before.
Do you have more than one camera?
Wait a minute.
There you go.
No, there.
Front camera, back camera.
I've been switching everything around.
Are you on a phone?
Working.
Are you on a phone?
No,
or
I'm on an iPad.
So I think that when someone speaks, that the order, I can't remember, we use like 3 different platforms that they use, but I think when someone speaks, your order in the grid may change.
Oh yeah, but what we're talking about was the view that she's showing from her iPad.
Okay.
It went to the front camera instead of the back camera. Go ahead.
All that trustee work she's got on her table.
Let's let Kathy speak.
Okay. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I had a question for Dan way back. When you were initially describing the trend analysis, you said Gelman had done it and everything was posted on the website. My question was, do you agree with Gelman's trend analysis? And have you summarized what you see as any major issues? Because sometimes we're struck, we need your summary and your opinions on it.
Well, we have not provided a summary. What we have looked at is that preliminary report. We asked them to do trend analysis with the statistics to see what kind of statistics they would propose to be under that. We are in agreement with that type of statistics. We have not done if you want to say review, a posting of a review of that specific document, because it was just a little portion of it. We were going to do a review once we got the whole, the trend analysis where they do, the monitoring wells that will be implemented, that will be sampled as during the modification of the monitoring plan. So to answer your question, we have not posted a review. Verbally, I'm telling you, we are in agreement with this, the statistics that they're using. It will come down to see, for example, to see how far back the trend analysis would go related to evaluation of historic samples. How far do we want to go back? One of the, I mean, you can go back all the way to the day one, but again, it's been, wells have been sampled for many, many, many years, and they have changed over those years. So what time frame, how far back would be the most, the best time frame to use for statistical analysis to monitor trends currently? You know, that's one of the questions that we will discuss and, you know, come up with in when we start modifying the changing and improving new monitoring plans. We are in agreement, though, overall with the statistical methods that have been identified.
Dan?
Yes.
Do you know why they had a limit of 40 in their trend analysis? 40 data points?
Well, one of the reasons, and I'm not a statistical person, statistician, one of the reasons is the particular method that they used identified, you know, a 40 representative measurements. So they just utilize that for right now. Again, we will look at that in the context of, okay, is that 40 quarterly measurements? Is that 40, you know, semi-annual? So when you do 40, you know, you can go back a very long way. But again, what is that usable, or is that really a valid analysis right now for how we are going to utilize this trend analysis? You know, what the current trend is and how is it changing? How does it change in the future?
Well, I guess really what I'm asking is, did you look into the platform they use to do the trend analysis? I think it's GSI out of Virginia. And it seems to me that that 40 is just a parameter that's built into this open source.
It is a parameter that was typically chosen. Roger, like I said, I'm not the statistician in our discussion.
So what happens is you can go back 40. You can go back 40 for one well, and it covers maybe 4 years. You go back 40 for another well, and it might cover 2 months. So you're not comparing apples and apples that way, where it doesn't seem to have a time span as an option. So when you're looking at the trends, you're only looking at the last, you're not looking at the same time frames.
Like I said, Roger, the final version or the final requirement that we're going to come up with, request from them for a trend analysis, will take that into account. You know, we want to make sure we look at for all the wells, you know, that are sampled quarterly, you know, semi-annual. There are different time frames. We understand that. So 40 is an arbitrary number. You're right. It was part of the statistical method that they use. We will make sure that that is efficient in monitoring what the current trends are to make decisions related to increase in sampling, decrease in sampling, which, you know, the time frame that samples are, you know, that are identified in the new monitor.
We need to move along here, but that as I recall, what you said in the past is that EGLE asked them to pick the wells to be in the trend analysis.
Well, we asked for yes. They picked a set of wells. We asked for some additional ones just as a preliminary package. Okay, let's see what, you know, how would you, what is your presentation for a trend analysis to make these types of decisions? So yes, they picked those, and then I asked for some additional ones, and the package that was put together and posted in our quarterly report, I think in December of last year, was that compilation of those wells. It wasn't all the wells. We didn't ask for all the wells at that time.
Okay, but some of the wells that were reported on were ones that you asked for.
Yes.
But
I specifically asked.
That's not noted. That's not noted in the report. We don't know which ones they came up with and which ones you added.
Okay.
that would be nice to know.
Okay. I'll we'll make sure, again, like I said, I can present that at the next card. I'll give you one ones I asked for.
I appreciate that. Anybody else want to comment on the trend analysis before we go on to another topic? How about the, since it's still on old business, the testing of wet basements? Anybody want to say something more about that? I'm looking at who here, who should know.
Vince had a comment in the chat. A question.
Okay, let me bring that up. So Vince said should do PI and GW tests to the east of 7th due to the groundwater elevations in those locations. And that's, I talked to Dan Dicknell yesterday, and he has the same concerns that there really should be more testing at Chapin Street where there's more likely to be dioxane in the groundwater near basements. And having it looking only upstream, up gradient, is maybe not the best place to start. And of course, there's another whole branch by Waterworks Park and stuff that it could be tested too, where there's very close to surface groundwater. I'm going to bring up the screenshot here.
Hey, Roger, this is Kristen. I think that Waterworks Park area was included after the MLive article was written.
That's right.
So I believe the area was included.
Yeah, I don't seem to have a graphic of that. I do of the other one. We're talking about this area here. Anything in this greenish area here is within 10, the groundwater is within 10 feet of the surface. So it'd be kind of important to look in this area. I'm going to bring up Google Earth.
That's a great map, Roger.
That's just a screenshot, but let me go back and do these are actually the 2006-2007 boundaries that Gelman put together of where the groundwater is close to the surface. I gotta get back to my full view, and then I can do a new share. New share, here we go. And then go to Google Earth Pro and share that. And then turn on some of these other layers that I had. Wet basement study area. So this was the original study area. And the new study area, again, I don't have an image loaded up here. I'm not sure I'm going to have one sent to me of where the new study area is going to be, but it was, I guess, include some of this down here by Waterworks Park. And really, we need to extend it all the way down to this area around Chapin Street on the east side of West Park and all the way down. And we've been asking for things like this for a while. If I turn on a couple other layers here, I'll show you. The state asked Gelman, and Gelman said, well, we'll pay for a temporary shallow well monitoring in these areas. And so these RL wells were the ones that were to be sampled one time only through temporary wells. There were 3 of those that were identified in the report, but never sampled. And it just so happens 2 of those are in the easternmost region that should have been sampled. The 2 hits they got were here at RL 13 and RL 12, 2 to 3, 2.7 to 3.3 parts per billion and 1.9 to 2 parts per billion, which is right around Slauson School. So there could have been hits as far east as this RL16 and RL14, which were originally identified, but for some reason not sampled.
Roger, the reason they weren't sampled was the utility clearances along Chapin Street. The utilities are very close together, and there are a lot of utilities. We chose not to go ahead in there because of the clearances that you know, we didn't have clearance from utility lines on both sides of the street.
Right.
And so that's 14
why.
and 15 were not at that time because of that.
Yeah. Well, you can imagine that a lot of the water here is buried underground in pipes to keep these areas from getting soggy. So there's got to be a lot more pipes around infrastructure. And so that it kind of works against the idea of sampling, but still there's got to be room to put in some permanent shallow groundwater monitoring in this area to find out what's really going on close to the surface. Doing it up here wouldn't be the natural first place to start. I mean, go where you know that the groundwater is close to the surface and close to basements. You might have wet basements up here. In fact, that's one of the layers that's available on our Google Earth mashup. But that water could be just perched water that's, you know, from runoffs. It's too shallow of elevation to be, you know, in the groundwater at that point. But the whole land surface falls away here and exposes contaminated aquifers. So if we don't have enough resources to do full monitoring, we should at least start where the risk is greatest, it seems to me. Vince, let's see, Vince doesn't have his mic working. Bob, did you want to say anything about that? I see your hand up, Beth. I don't see Bob.
Oh, for me then, or Bob?
Well, Bob's got to unmute. Bob's got to unmute.
Patty, last month, Patty did say they were going to be testing near Slauson and that whole area, in addition to the part you have. I remember she confirmed that last month.
Right, but we just don't have. At least I don't have the area image of exactly what's going to be, where it's going to be tested. So Bob, you're unmuted now. Did you want to say something about this?
Well, it seems to me that one could start rather simply with some temporary wells that are only 6 feet deep or something, almost like a post hole, and figure out sort of where to start with a real program. Because what they found with the initial program was that they didn't, because of the choice of locations and so on, that they didn't really see what was in the near surface water, where we know that the groundwater is close to the surface, and where you would expect it to be if you simply extrapolate from the cross sections that Yeoman did between 10 and 20 years ago. And we know that the groundwater has moved to the east. So I think that it seems to me a logical way to start might be with some more temporary wells where you don't have to, and maybe not in the optimum areas, but especially around Slauson School where the Allen Creek drain apparently has some dioxane, as well as Chapin Street and and around 7th Street, because the groundwater is very close to the surface in some areas around 7th Street. And well, maybe not quite at the surface, but I think that those are the areas where you really want to start looking, because that's where people are living. And then down in Chapin Street, I would be surprised if the bulk of the plume has gotten there yet, because based on what was observed in 2016, now 4 years ago.
So what I've done here is taken away, the larger area. I could put those back. You know, this is the area that's going to be most risk because the water's closer to the surface. We can go another 10 feet down, but your temporary 6-foot wells wouldn't do anything for this larger area. So if you're going to start, and I mean, if the temporary well, the cost of putting in a permanent well for repeated monitoring isn't that much more than putting in a temporary well. Why wouldn't you put permanent wells in? Because if you get a 0 hit on a temporary well, non-detect hit on a temporary well, that only tells you for that point in time. Because this temporary well, it's not going to be there next time. You might not be able to get access the next time. Well, if you have a permanent well, you can monitor this over time. I mean, not doing longitudinal time-based studies on this is kind of like getting a COVID negative reading to say, well, I've tested negative for COVID, therefore I don't have to ever worry again.
I want to point out, if you remember the shallow groundwater investigation, the use of temporary wells was chosen because to put permanent wells in was a much more complicated and complex permitting process from the county, and with some more monetary requirements and specific guidance on where wells could go. So we went with temporary wells at that particular time in 2016. The locations were chosen based upon complaints of shallow water in basements. So each one of those locations was in close proximity to the complaints that were given to us by the city, by the county, by the stakeholders. So that's why they were chosen that way. Like I said, RL 15 would have been a great location, but at the particular time when the utilities, Ms. Digg cleared the utilities, it was just there was just too many utilities, and we did not want to take a chance of having hitting a utility in that area. So we didn't put a temporary well in. But if any future work, I agree that more permanent wells would be logical choices. We did it. We did the temporary well work based upon the stakeholders' input, wanting information quickly, and we wanted to quickly see if there was a risk related to shallow groundwater and vapor intrusion, because at that particular time, our criteria screening level was 29. That was, if you remember, emergency rule was identified as 29. So we wanted to get in and get a snapshot right now. Is someone immediately at risk approaching that screening level of 29?
Yeah, but that still doesn't tell us whether there's dioxane in this near surface groundwater here. And this is still an outstanding issue that I think most of us at CARD would like to see addressed sooner rather than later.
There's an issue with groundwater contamination upstream. That is, was 1,000 part per billion near Vets Park in recent years. And our main concern, I think, is that this is moving towards West Park, which is at 22 part per billion. And I think we really need to focus some attention on the potential exposures to homeowners on the west side of the city. I don't think, I think Gelman should be responsible to manage analysis with EGLE oversight of this concern. And I don't think it's happening at this point. And I think it's a real problem for the west side of the city. And I think it needs
Yeah, I agree. So
well, let me just make one more point if I could, that the U of M is actually trying to do some basement testing and some vapor intrusion issues. That would behoove the Eagle to try and work with them. They have the equipment, they have the expertise, they've done vapor intrusion tests extensively. I think you should reach out to Stuart Batterman at School Public Health. And he tested some wells or some groundwater west of 7th Street and found no 1,4-dioxane. We know we find it at West Park. So I think from 7th into West Park is a pretty steep drop. And so we need to move to the east, where Roger showed we have higher groundwater near the surface. And I think that is a real concern. And this may just be a prelude to west side of Ann Arbor exposure potential that needs to be evaluated and avoided at all costs, in my opinion. Just like we need to avoid contaminating wells in Scioto Township, Ann Arbor Township. We can't wait until people are exposed to take action. I think we need to try and get out in front of this and not ignore the realities that we're finding here on the ground. That is very surprising that West Park is at 22 part per billion. I don't think anybody expected that. I'm glad Eagle did those tests. But I think we need to act on some of this data and not just keep evaluating. We need to actually, make some plans and make sure homeowners are not exposed, or businesses for that matter. Thanks.
what I've just pulled up here are the locations that Dan Bicknell proposed back, I think, in 2016 for permanent shallower groundwater testing down gradient. And we still don't have those permanent wells. This well right here, MW82S, is the only shallow well in the center part of the plume that's heading towards West Park. We've got a couple other shallow wells here, but you have to go all the way back to Maple Road to find other wells that are as shallow enough to show what's in that intermediate shallow aquifer. And here's one here. And of course, that well doesn't exist anymore. and there's some more shallow wells, but there's a whole layer here of aquifer that's heading toward this area that has dioxin in it. And we really don't have enough sampling of that aquifer to know how much is going towards West Park and how much is going down towards Waterwork Park. Just not enough monitoring. And of course, there's no real purging going on of that aquifer either. And that, trying to cut it off at Maple Road, but as we've seen with these wells that are no longer sampled, there could be a lot of dioxin heading there, and some of it's shallow and some of it's deep. Here are the wells. These are all the wells, but I'm going to turn on a layer that shows the ones that are currently inactive. So these are wells that used to be sampled that haven't been sampled recently. Dan mentioned this earlier in his update. But these wells here, some of them are deep, single digit parts per billion, but there's data that we used to get from these and we're not getting anymore. I'm gonna go back to the agenda. Let's see, where did I put it? Screen, second screen. Windows. bear with me here. Oh, I should show this one before I get too far. This is the mashup that shows how we're talking about the shallower aquifer here. And MW82 is the only monitoring well in this aquifer until you get to West Park. And there should be more monitoring of what's going on. And even with that, it's not in the upper part of that aquifer. So as the land surface falls away, this dioxin is being exposed. This is down near West Park here. There's also some deeper stuff going on that could be heading to the river, under the river. Anybody want to comment on this before I leave this image? Let's see, hands up, okay. Kristen, you've reached out to Eagle. Okay, so Kristen asked Vince to follow up with the U of M. And Mike is trying to be a process observer here, saying it's 11 o'clock and we're still on old business, so I guess we should move on. Screen share. I'll stop sharing. Really need to have a co-host or a bigger monitor, one or the other. I had these all queued up. Now my second monitor over here is just a picture of me for some reason. So let's try to get that taken care of. Enter full screen. Share the screen. Share. So here we're back to the agenda. Yeah, this is where I want to be. Okay. So let's bring that one up. And so Dan, we're back to you for new business.
Okay. I checked with the Water Resources Group this week about the status of the NPDES permit renewal. It is still within internal review. They have not sent their review to Gelman yet. Again, after that is done with and their discussions with Gelman, it'll be made public and a public notice, and as they've committed to, they will have a public meeting, whether electronically or in person meeting. It'll be dependent on what the situation is at that time. Jessica reconfirmed to me, Jessica Stiles reconfirmed to me that she will email the CARD group and other interested parties to notify them, specifically when the permit is going to be put for public notice. So you don't have to keep searching the public notice webpage of Eagle. She will notify CARD core group that the permit is out and can be reviewed and reviewed and start putting together your comments. for that review period. Again, they have committed to have a public meeting. Again, the format will be determined at the time. The next bullet I had, the next under new business is.
We have a question on that last one. Item. Go ahead, Ray.
It's very quick. I just would ask that we get some decent notice for the public hearing.
Right.
You know, yeah, we'll all get an email, but we want it more than a week in advance.
Okay.
Is that possible today?
I will ask. I don't know what they are currently doing under the current situation, but I will ask Jessica, you know, to you know, the advance notice. What are they giving out right now? And tell them your concerns that you want to make sure you have plenty of advance notice.
Sure. Yeah, more than a week. I'd say a month at least.
Well, and I don't know how they are doing, you know, the permit process right now under the current restrictions. So let me check.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The next item that's on there is a 2020 Homeowner Well sampling. Jenny, I ask a little help from you on that, since we are, you'll be coordinating that with EGLE and with the homeowners. Can you give me some help?
Yep. The notice letters were mailed this week, and we're waiting for our bottles to come from the EGLE Laboratory in Lansing. So hopefully they get here soon. And it's scheduled to begin June 15th. So the EGLE Lab is accepting dioxin samples the 15th through the 26th of this month. So we have,
that's your first
for the Gelman site, 186 properties.
Yep. Some of those properties will be sampled. Well, they were proposed to be sampled twice. We'll see how it condenses into this calendar, you know, this fiscal year. But 186 properties with I mean, if everything was going as normal, it was a 212 or 215 or so, plus or minus, total samples will be sent into the laboratory for analysis. That is, if you remember, we had implemented kind of a biannual, every 2-year sampling of certain locations. We condensed that. We are going back and sample the same locations that we did last year again, in response to that positive detection out to the west. So we are, you know, with the county, are sampling 186, proposed 186 locations this year. We take a look at each of the locations, those locations every year, Jenny and I, and come up with a plan of how we want to, you know, make sure we sample enough to make sure we have a notification or identification of any risk to residential well users. If you remember, we try to sample wells at Jenny's suggestion, and we concurred trying to sample the residential wells within 1,000 feet of known contamination. We set a limit of 1,000 feet so we can have a cutoff point of being able to say, okay, we're going to sample all these wells in here, but outside that 1,000 feet, we're gonna, you know, we're not going to sample, just because we started to get inundated, you know, started to get requests from wells that were well outside or the current contamination or likelihood of contamination. So we set that 1,000-foot boundary for now as part of our yearly evaluation.
Before you go on, Jenny, do you have a map you can share of, or a KMLA or something of what wells are going to be sampled this next round?
Yes, I have that on my to-do list to get to you. I will do that.
Appreciate that.
Those wells are sent to the the water laboratory. You know, any samples that I take in, I send them to the environmental laboratory. Two different divisions of the same laboratory. The methodology is the same method that's used. 8260 SIM is the current method. It's really the same instrument, same person, but we get it. It gets printed out and sent to two different directions. So Jenny has to schedule her samples in. I have a little more leeway on some environmental samples and can submit those at uneven intervals. You know, I don't have to wait for them to say, okay, you have windows to submit. So, but it's the same instrument, same methodology. Along those lines, some additional, under what's new, some additional items. Back in March, I committed to, you know, surface water sampling this year. I think back then is I identified August, September 2020 to try to complete that process. I'm still aiming at that time frame, August, September. Again, to do all the surface water locations that we've done in the past. I think we added the Honey Creek at Miller Road at the request of CARD. We will also add in the Allen Creek Drain at West Park again, and as we've done in years past. And then the Glendale Circle, that tributary down there near Vince's house there, that will also be part of it. But it will include surface water, Little Lake, First Sister Lake, Second Sister Lake, Third Sister Lake, the Smith's Ponds, the Honey Creek named tributary of Honey Creek at Jackson Park, Jackson Road, Park Road. We'll do the Gelman discharge outfall a little bit upstream of the Gelman discharge outfall toward the marshy area there. Honey Creek at Dexter Road, Honey Creek at Miller Road. We'll go up to where we have the Honey Creek and Huron River HCHR confluence. I will take a sample where Gelman currently does their sample. It really more out in the river, but I also will take a sample there that I have done in the past at the North Maple Ridge Road, right across, that's across the Huron River there, but also the Honey Creek right there at the West Huron Drive, the bridge right there, which is a lot closer to the confluence of Honey Creek and Huron River there. We'll go ahead and do West Park Pond, Hannah Nature Area again. And what we have done in the past is we will complete those in August and September.
And Dan,
I don't have dates yet. But,
Dan, for those in stream, in surface water sampling, I can't remember, did you already give me the coordinates for those?
I don't remember myself, Roger. I will make a note, coordinates to Roger. You're talking about which ones, Roger, specifically?
All the surface water sampling locations, because some of them don't have addresses, obviously.
Check all.
So.
I will, let me check, Roger. I'd have to go back. I'll go back to my emails, check all coordinates. Okay.
Yeah, I have the approximate ones that I think I got just by overlaying the map on Google Earth. And
well, I mean, we've set some of our own, so I'd rather that you and I be in agreement that right. whether we're using the same one between us. So let me check.
What I'll do then is I will share what layer I have for the XYs, and you can tell me if they're the ones that you have, and make
if that would be helpful. It would. So I'll check my emails too. I mean,
make a note of
what
that,
I recently. Let's see here. Anything else? I have one thing that I did not gather information on that was requested at the last Zoom meeting. Roger, you had brought up a question about the latest quarterly report, groundwater flow maps, not the latest one, but historically the quarterly reports and Gelman's groundwater flow maps, and their averaging of groundwater flow in the MW 121 and MW 129 area. I have not sat down and asked them to discuss that with them, so that's something that's left on my platter to get that information and present at a future CARD meeting. So I'm still aware of that request from the last time. Let's see, that's all I had under my report. Does anybody have any questions that I can
Beth had
answer?
one about maybe Eagle should sample the outflow of Allen Creek at the Huron River.
We have talked about that. We have not committed to do that right now. That's something we'll take under advisement. Again, you're getting outside of a little bit outside of what what my division does. So we'll talk with Washtenaw County. We'll talk with that. It's a possibility for future, but I don't want to commit that we're going to absolutely do that under this surface water sampling program right now.
Yeah, well, I understand this is multi-jurisdictional problem. So
yeah, absolutely, I understand that, Roger. It's just you know, I wanted to.
Water really doesn't care what the boundaries are.
Yeah. Well, I just didn't want to commit. I want to manage expectations. We'll look into it.
I have a question. The last test you did at West Park in the park itself was quite a while ago. Seems to me that waiting until August, September is a long span between tests. That test we requested because it was so straightforward and relatively easy to do. I know you have to come to Ann Arbor to do it, but I think we should have more testing that's closer together to get a better handle on this. It jumped pretty quickly over the last several tests. Last one was 22 part per billion. If we look at Bob Bailey or Dr. Bob Bailey's analysis, his suggestion is 100 part per billion can be a real issue for homeowners. So I would like to see it considered doing the test more often.
Well, to do that, I have to coordinate. It's not just me, Eagle, doing that. It has to be coordinated in with the city. They open up the manhole and provide that. Last time when we did that multi-month, 6-month study, Gelman also assisted that during that time frame. So I'll check on that. But I will commit to, we'll get a sample here this summer, and let me see the time frame.
All right. Any other discussion on Eagle's updates? Looking, don't see any. I don't have much for the card share updates. I'm going to share a couple things I did find, and I got to find them again here. So I'm going to go to new share, and I'm going to pull up a spreadsheet of the last monthly data. And it's going to render here in a moment. Is anybody else's internet slowing down like mine is? There we go. So what I'm highlighting here are the samples from April, last 2 months ago now, really. And this is the PDF in an Excel spreadsheet that they give for the general public, not even the DEQ version that's specially formatted with separate columns. You know, it's run together with the well name, the date, and the time. But I figured out a way to parse it apart and compare it with the previous high to date for each of these wells. So for instance, MW 117 had a previous high of 3 parts per billion, but in April it has a new high of 4. And similarly for MW 92, it went from 60 to 71. For MW KD 1S, it went from 110 to 120. And for NW 104, it went from 20 to 23. So these are tend to be in the middle of the plume or the northern parts of the plume. And they're still going up. And just to be aware that some wells are stabilizing, have gone down, but even some of those are going back up, not to their original highest values, but when you look at the Google Earth mashup and click on a few of the wells, just for even through 2019, you'll see that some of the wells that used to be going down are going back up again. Now, we don't know if this is because there's the original source for this dioxane hasn't been captured enough, certainly at the core and other areas, or if it's because there's been this much dioxane in the pipeline that's finally made it to these monitoring wells. I'm going to share the Google Earth view of this, and we'll just click on a couple wells. So the 104 is here. So where it was 20, and now it's like 23 or 24. So that's an indication that this is heading to the north, expanding to the north. 92 is another one. It's going up. There's some that are getting closer to the northern boundary here that we're worrying about. So there's definitely a northward movement here that it may take longer for some of this dioxane to get where it's going, but there's not a whole lot of evidence of capture. Remember, originally, the company was required by the consent judgment to capture this whole evergreen area here. And they tried 3 or 4 monitoring wells to do that and didn't have the capacity to do it. And so they convinced the state to allow the prohibition zone to be expanded to this area. So instead of having to clean this up to 85 parts per billion, they can now let it go at 2,800 parts per billion. And of course, that may get reduced through these secret negotiations at some point in the future, but it's already been more than 3 years. And is that going to be 280? Is it going to be something less? The cleanup standard went from 85 down to 7.2. There's a lot of dioxane in the pipeline in this area. If we pull up the 3D view, you can see that quite a bit of that is heading toward the north. And unremediated. There's no monitoring, there's no purge wells in the major area here where they show the highest concentration. So that's an ongoing concern, especially, I mean, their own maps show that it's going straight north. So, and as I point out over and over again, there's a lot of homeowner wells in the pathway long before it gets to Barton Pond, where Ann Arbor gets about 85% of its water. So here's the
Roger. I just wanted to clarify one thing. I mean, I'm one of the regulators. You were a little wrong in your statement that the state agreed to and authorized. This has all been under the court.
The court allowed it. You're right. You're right. It wasn't the state.
We had argued for some more stringent in 2005 that you pointed out, and then even later in later years. So eventually, for lack of a better description, we kind of lost in court for some of the more strict what we had asked for, and the court had allowed it to turn. A court assigned the consent judgment to what the current conditions are.
Now instead of losing in court, nothing's happening in court.
Well, like I said, I mean, we've been, and I know you're frustrated, we've been in confidential negotiations to modify that CJ. Part of those negotiations, it's not just Gelman and Eagle. The interveners were allowed in, and that negotiations and those opinions are part of those negotiations now. Some of your stakeholders, some of your local units of government, the representatives, they are part of these negotiations. So I don't have an answer. I know you're frustrated. I'm frustrated. So I would love to gather some additional information as we move. We change the criteria as we move to trying to implement the new criteria and see where that goes. But
I'm pretty
where we are currently.
I'm pretty sure the judge has never seen this Google Earth modeling that I've done.
One other issue was the prohibition zone was changed pretty quickly after it was established and allowed to move north. Contrary to what Gelman has been saying, that the plume will not move north. That was a pretty strong indication that their models were not.
Well, their data was very lacking. They stopped sampling some wells that should have been sampled all along, that would have given everybody a heads up and could have even prevented the contamination of the city's supply well, Northwest supply well. But we don't have time to go into all that.
I just want to remind, once it goes past M14, it's the downhill run into Barton, according to Larry Lemke.
Yeah, and according to other
something
studies that have been
consider.
done, if you turn on the flow layers here, groundwater flows. This one, I think, is maybe one of the better ones. It kind of shows which way it's going. Waiting for it to render. Boom. So these are the topographical lines, and of course the city is already looked at the monitoring along this tributary that goes directly to Barton Pond, but there's two other tributaries that lead from this contamination area, or could be impacted by this contamination area, that feed into Honey Creek and run behind my house here, that empties into Huron River upstream of Barton Pond. And as far as I know, there's been no extra monitoring along these other two tributaries. The city's concerned about this because, this is directly to Barton Pond, but this contamination might hit here before it hits this one. In fact, there's already been some PFAS contamination found here in this area. So
I'd also like to remind you that Larry Lemke, or Dr. Lemke, commented at a CARD meeting that there is an old creek bed just north of M14 that he says is a preferred path that will direct the flow right into Barton, and will enhance the flows to Barton that others have not discussed much. But
is he talking about
pretty much
pre-glacier creek bed? Because there's a lot of those.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, as the
that's why he
glaciers
says
fought over this area, there's been a lot of layers put down that we don't really have good understanding of.
Yeah, well, that's why he was saying it's a downhill run into Barton.
Yeah.
Plus, it's a geologically, if you look at the topography, that's pretty much indication of where the groundwater will flow.
That is one indication, but there are others. There are other flows that cannot be explained by topography. Like, why is this? Why are we having these southwest plumes down here from the core? That goes against existing data. Yeah, it's there.
And the MSU study of wells, existing wells, indicated a bifurcation potential for the plume as well, towards Barton and then towards the city downtown. So
yeah,
there are some concerns here, I think, that cannot be just ignored and need to be taken in.
These depictions as the plume of, evenly spread is really not reality. It spreads in little fingers and then may fill in over time. But Larry Lemke's spaghetti finger model is what we should be thinking about whenever we look at. We happen to find some of those narrow pathways with high concentrations, but when they found some of those high concentrations, they didn't then go back and say, where is this coming from and where is it going to? There wasn't, if you think about the dioxin kind of being like a virus, if you have a hit someplace, you want to know where it came from and you want to know where it's likely to go to so you can stop it. It's not like virus and it spreads by train and bus and things like that, but it's going to go in preferred pathways. And if you happen to find one of those preferred pathways with high concentrations, which they've done over and over again, but then don't go back and find out the actual pathway, you just found a point in the pathway, then that's being negligent. There's got to be better sampling, better science on this. So that's about all I have to say on that. Let's go back and see what the next thing is here. I gotta scroll down so you can see. And Vince, you mentioned the Allen Creek sampling. You'd like to see more of it, and I think Dan gave a brief update on it. You want to talk more about that? Anybody?
Just that I'm glad that we're going to continue doing the testing. I think it's an important situation where we're having, it looks like the contamination coming to the surface, and that's a real concern for a lot of people in Ann Arbor, and we really need to make sure that the homeowners aren't exposed. Like I said, it would be great if we could work with the U of M, and I'll contact them again to see if there can't be some synergy going on.
I just want to.
They're definitely interested in this, and they've done vapor intrusion before, and they've actually studied 1,4-dioxane. So it's kind of a coming together of interests, and they have a lot of expertise, and we could make use of that, and we're not going to have to pay them, and they're experts in vapor intrusion. So it seems like a win-win all the way around. So we need to try and make sure we take advantage of that if we can.
Yeah, it sounds like it's funded by a grant, and the problem with grant type studies like that is they don't continue long enough in the time scale of the dioxin contamination.
Well, Stuart Batterman is very well funded. He's been doing this for a long time. He's got a postdoc that's working with him.
Yeah, but
I think
back to the MSU, when MSU had a project that went for a couple of years and then the funding ran out and they're gone. And even the website that used to have some good information on it is gone. So we need more continuity. We need continuity on this problem to match the scale, the actual continuity of dioxin. Dioxin's not going to go away anytime soon by itself. We have to have the continuity and funding and resources and cooperation among all the units. So I agree that, some sampling of the Allen Creek area is good, but we gotta do it in the way that makes the most sense scientifically. And if we have limited resources, then it should be applied to where you're most likely to see dioxin in basements. And that's true for the rest of the site too, where there's, we know there's some dioxin, we know that there must be a pathway there, and we haven't identified those pathways. And there's probably other pathways that we haven't found. The whole deep aquifer was unknown supposedly before 2000 because they didn't sample some of the wells that were in that aquifer. They quit sampling MW30D for 7 or 8 years. And that's why we have a huge problem now.
Yeah, I would like to also encourage elected officials who are involved in the CGA to get it moving and make a decision on that, because we're in the dark and we don't know what's going on with that. And I think we need to encourage them to move forward, make a decision, and don't allow Gelman to hide behind the CGA negotiations. And they'll do that as long as they can. And we need to make sure that we're not taken advantage of like we have been in the past, and take control of this effort.
Yeah.
And I see
Yeah,
Ann
it's gonna take
Bannister
long.
there. So
Beth,
I
did
would
you
like
have
to
something?
encourage you.
You just doing a thumbs up, Beth? Okay. Yeah, I think we can't let this temporary COVID problem be an excuse to just delay. We have to get back on. The dioxin doesn't care that we have a virus among the humans here. The dioxin continues to spread. Kathy?
And we are working, we were going to have a meeting again with the, hi. Yes, I'm recovering from climate action, went on till 2 a.m. last night. And, you know, you would think the plume and the climate action plan would have substantial overlap in my mind. And for future, you know, we've just launched this $1 billion 7 strategy plan. So hopefully the plume will be in those conversations if I have anything to do with it. But yes, to Vince's point too, we're talking to our attorney's office was scheduling meetings for us, and then they weren't able to get a date and they sort of went away. So I think they got submerged in the budget and the A20 plan. And now I expect here in early June to get back on track with that. And I've been listening for the last half an hour, and I heard back, you know, about the Chapin wells and the West Side wells. And so you guys know where to find me if you have specific action steps or questions that you want me to bird dog and get an answer back. Otherwise, I appreciate just learning from you guys the language and the issues.
Thank you. Kathy?
I just wanted to say that most of us agree with Vince. We want to get moving. But the reality is that the next steps involved group meetings and potentially public meetings in front of this judge. And right now, the courts are on hold. I mean, the COVID situation is real and it's still there. Yeah. So it's not that we are allowing it to take over, but the reality is it's a significant public health issue, as Rita knows, I'm sure.
I would like to ask when the last meeting occurred. That's public knowledge. It should be publicly available.
Been a while.
How long was a while?
Pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID. So we're looking at maybe 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
I don't know.
Early March. It was before St. Patrick's Day, March.
Yeah.
Well, it was in the courthouse.
Yeah, we were there. Roger and I showed up.
Yeah, we showed up. We weren't allowed to go into the actual meeting, but we were there for the beginning part of it.
I was there
we
all day.
Yeah.
That's been a while, yeah. That's,
so I think we're
unfortunate.
The local units are getting played by the Gelman.
I agree.
Gelman's an expert at this stuff.
Well,
March
that's what the
9th.
lawyers are hired for,
The 9th of March, March 9.
Yeah. So yeah, that's. Yep.
Well, it's my understanding that they were trying to prepare all of our amendments to the CJ, and then as soon as we had the date with the judge, and we would be free to release the 150 pages to the public so that you guys could weigh in on it. And that's where I suggested we needed a executive summary, because there's no way person could read all that. And then we just, Kathy, is that where you thought we were at?
Well, your Ann Arbor situation might be slightly different than the Scioto Township situation. So I think maybe that's where you were at. We were still in a quasi holding pattern, waiting for a final version and waiting for the next time we would be in front of the judge. I thought. That was my understanding.
Well, the public has been, kept out of the loop here. I think that's totally inappropriate. And I think our elected officials need to push to make sure the public gets involved and actually has some input into what's happening. And I just want to warn you again, Gelman is an expert at kicking this can down the road, and we need to work to make the public's interest above Gelman's interest, because that's really what we're talking about.
And I do, Vince, that is what's happening with the city council members. They are pushing and trying to get the amendments all in the documents to send to the judge so that the public can be involved. And like I said, I think we just got submerged in the COVID, the budget, and the A20. And I think that Kathy's coming over to my house here any minute now. And she was at the civil rights marches this morning. So I bet, what's today, Tuesday morning, I bet we'll have more back on the plume this week today.
Well, thanks for your interest, Ann. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, that's good discussion. We have a new person here. Eric, do you want to introduce yourself? Unmute. Or just press the space bar. There you go.
Got it. Oh, okay. Hi. Eric Lipson. Still muted? Good.
I didn't recognize you at first.
I've got hair.
Yes.
And so do you.
It's the new look.
I tried to think. You look more like
followed CARD for a long time.
You look more like Cotter, I think. No, I was looking like Grizzly Adams.
So I'll be happy to hear what the city council has to say too, because it's about time. It's been what, 2 years since the case has been in discussion by the parties. We need some action by the judge.
Let's see, who else hasn't had a chance to talk? Bob Hyde, did you want to weigh in on any of this?
No, that's okay, Roger. I'm learning a lot.
And Brian Nagel, do you want to chime in? And
Nothing to add at this point.
And Spencer, you want to introduce yourself again and say a word or two? I see your block. I just don't see you unmuted yet. I'll unmute you. Spencer, are you there?
Hey, Roger, this is Dylan.
Oh, Dylan, okay.
Just listening in. Yeah, we share one account for the fourth view on Zoom, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's new with you guys?
We may, not much. We may have some big news in the coming weeks, so on the story, but we're still kind of tracking it down and stuff. So one of the lead counsels for Gelman might want to be interviewed by us. So we'll be having updates within that story soon.
Okay. I've talked about having a Zoom session with the people that used to be involved on the Gelman thing who are no longer involved.
Okay.
We'll see. I'm going to see how that develops.
Yeah. When were they thinking I'm doing that.
Well, we just talked about it briefly, but I want to get people's. I want to get some of this institutional knowledge down before it walks away or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, yeah, please keep updated, and I'll keep updated on if this pans out.
I'm sure there's more stories out there like Jim had and Diane had. And that's from inside the company. I actually had a sit down with Arsad Fatoui before COVID hit, or just as it was hitting. And we had a lunch meeting, and he's off, I think, hired by somebody out in Massachusetts now. I don't know if he's moved out there, just working remotely probably, but he and Sybil and some of the other people that and want to get their insights documented for posterity, while it's still somewhat fresh in their minds. And Kevin, I think
Roger,
who's talking?
This is Mike Moran. I just wanted to add a little bit to the confusion on the consent judgment. It appeared, I've talked to some people in the county and the city as well. And obviously we're not talking about the substance of the consent judgment, but there seems to be some confusion in both jurisdictions about when they can release this proposed consent judgment for public discussion. And there's some feeling amongst some that they have to either accept or reject the consent judgment before it's declared to be a final proposal so that it can be discussed. And this kind of confusion is maddening because it's keeping all of us from knowing what's in it and discussing it. And there seems to be no agreement between everybody as to just when they can talk about it. So this is really a frustrating part of this consent, not the consent judgment, but the confidential.
And Mike, I thought it was when, as soon as it's filed with the judge, then Judge Connors, then
I haven't heard that one from anybody. It seemed to me,
That's not
to be, at least as of last week, some of the discussion in the city and the county seemed to be about the group, that is either the county or the city, having to take some final decision before it can be released, which is contraindicated. I would think the whole purpose of the releasing it for public comment is so that we can weigh in before they make it.
Right, and that might not happen. Kathy?
Can I weigh in? Yeah. My understanding was that it was to be released before the individual groups voted on it. And the thing we were waiting on was all of the attorneys being able to recommend to the relative parties that they recommend accepting this settlement agreement, and then it would go in front of the judge, and the judge would lift the confidentiality agreement. So that was my understanding. None of that's happened, but once it's lifted, then the public can review it, and the township, the city, the county would vote later, and that there would be a series of public meetings where everyone can voice their opinions on it in front of the judge. This is what I was told
I
earlier.
heard that from some people regarding the city, and you know what? That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I mean, it's the same thing as the process of the DEQ, where they make a preliminary decision in order on some permit application before it's ever released to anybody to discuss. And this is almost even worse, because there were some people talking about agreeing to recommend the consent judgment, even though that's not where their hearts or their minds were. They were doing it for the sole purpose of bringing it out so it could be discussed. And that really makes no sense.
Yeah, this has happened over and over again and again. I think it looks like the local units are being played, and the various councils are going along with, because that's the way normal negotiations work. But this is not a normal type negotiation. I mean, this involves multi-jurisdictional. It involves health for far into the future.
Yeah, I think what we really need is just some decision from somebody that this is the final offer from Gelman, and then it can be released, and then it can be discussed. And many of the people I were talking to, that's what they're trying to get to too. But there's a great deal of confusion about, do you get there by accepting or rejecting, or how else?
Yeah, well, we've had 3 years of negotiations that we don't know all of the points that are being negotiated. And it could be, I've even heard where if it's not accepted, then the public will never find out what the proposals were.
Roger, when you say if it's not accepted, you mean if the attorneys representing these parties don't recommend it to their clients?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is what I have been told also.
Yeah,
But
I'm
again,
really uncomfortable with having
I want to be
attorneys
clear.
have that much power.
My understanding is no vote would be taken by the township, the city, the county until after the public had an opportunity to weigh in. That is my understanding of what the process would be. It could change, and Brian Nagel could weigh in on this too, his understanding.
Well,
Brian, what do you
the
think?
public has weighed in on this long before the negotiations started. And it's pretty clear what the public wants. And we're on track to have the EPA come in and take over the administration of this with their enforcement powers that the state units don't have. And that's been scuttled and delayed. The local units are still going to have to get involved. The state's going to have to be involved. But the way it is right now, we are losing in negotiations because it's not even making it to court.
Kathy has described, the process as I understand it, or it's consistent with my understanding of how the local unit of government interveners are going to handle it. But so that's all I can add.
I know. Yeah, that's because the ground rules are screwy. So I think we're about wrapping up time. Anybody want any final comments here?
I just want to make a comment about it. It seems like the elected officials don't really have control of this. It's more in the hands of the lawyers. And I think that is a really flawed process. And I'm not sure how we got to that, but the elected officials really should have the ultimate decision here. And we need to work in that direction. Unfortunately, delay is a win for Gelman and a loss for the community and the residents and for public health. This is a major public health issue that we can't just be kicking down the road because it's not staying where it is. It's moving, and it's moving in directions that are challenging Scioview Township, Ann Arbor Township, and the City of Ann Arbor. And if we want to maintain our quality of life, we need to deal with this and not just let it take over our lives like it has already, unfortunately. So a delay is a win.
I don't understand how it is possible that a client cannot be briefed by his attorney about a proposed settlement. That's absurd. It's unethical. You can't do that. You're not the lawyer is not the client.
Well, in here, I want to say that, Jack and Jeff and Kathy and Ollie, I assure you there is rigorous talk going on. And Kathy has stopped over. And could she say a minute before we adjourn?
Sure.
Please.
Hi. Yeah, I just want to say I am not going to vote for anything that before there's a public hearing. So, and I haven't heard that the plan has changed. So I'm a little concerned that people think it has. So,
okay.
is there information that states from that someone has inside information from a lawyer?
No, there was just question about the process as to what the sequence. When are the people going to get a chance to weigh in? And the way it was described was absurd in that all the lawyers had to agree that this was the settlement that they could accept, and then it would be released to the public. And that makes no sense at all. So if you could illuminate us as to your understanding of the sequence, that would be great.
Yeah.
And that if you didn't accept it, we'd never see it.
Yeah. Well, I think.
Okay, I guess I was free last night and think, but to my knowledge, nothing has changed, and I am expecting it to go before the public in the near future. But I've been saying that for weeks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we understand that the elected officials are probably doing as much as they can, but it's still not enough because we're stuck in this constraints that somehow we got stuck in, and it's not right. By the way, this is Honey Creek behind my house, beginning of May. This was
lovely.
This is Honey Creek. A couple weeks later, the same position.
Wow.
2 inches of rain. So those rocks that you saw there are another under 3.5 feet of water, moving about 20 miles an hour.
Wow.
And the back 40 was kind of underwater. I hope we never get 5 or 6 inches of rain because we'll have to move to the second floor. Anyway, I think that wraps it up. I don't have an end screen to go to. This one guy on Zoom, he says, well, how do you end a Zoom meeting with this many people? And the consensus was to like wave with your left hand, your non-dominant hand, while you sign off with your right dominant hand. I was thinking I was going to have an end screen that was like an explosion or something else that summarizes the meeting. So any ideas people have along those lines, send them to me. But I'll leave you with a little something here. Maybe. I was actually first time I enabled breakout rooms. Is there, if somebody really wants to continue for a while longer in a breakout room, you know, a few people at a time, we could do that. But we're already at the 2-hour point, so I got to go eat lunch pretty soon. But I could leave it go for another half hour if somebody really wanted to do that. I don't see any hands up, so I'm gonna change my.
Well, you know where to find.
Say again.
I encourage anybody to. You guys know where to find me if you want to chat more about anything from Ward 1 perspective.
Yeah.
Thank
If there's any breaking news before the July meeting,
yeah,
we can have a pop-up Zoom session.
I'm great with breaking news. That is one of the things I do best is, yeah, sharing the information. And that is where I would say that the more we can, if you guys have any expertise in executive summaries for the voter of the material, I'm really worried that just when we go public, if it's all just, hey, read this 1,000 documents, we're going to get people shooting from the hip based, and people could frame the message in the wrong way. So if anyone feels like bullet points to get the public ready, that's what I think is something people could work on. I've asked the city to do it, and I'm not optimistic that they think that's their responsibility.
So this is a meme for how the public feels about the Gelman.
Yeah.
Our first grandchild, our granddaughter, at what, 3 weeks old, she's trying to start to crawl already.
Yeah.
And it's getting frustrated because she can't get her arms quite working, her legs. But raising her head up at that age, I mean, we hope that maybe a year from now, because she was born on our 49th wedding anniversary, we're hoping a year from now we could at least hold her on her first birthday. She's out in Palo Alto. Anyway, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Roger.
Good meeting.
Loved your hairdo, Eric.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good.